Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. I'm Cheryl Reynolds with the UC statewide IPM program, and welcome to today's UC Ag Expert Talk on avocado cankers and their causes. Peter Cosina is also here with me, and he's going to be running the polls and troubleshooting any problems that might come up. And please note that today's webinar is targeted to growers and pest management professionals. Master gardeners can certainly benefit from participating, but the pest management methods presented, especially the pesticides, are not to be followed without a clear understanding of their legal use by homeowners. Okay, so now I'd like to introduce today's speaker. Dr. Ben Faber is the Soils, Water, and Subtropical Advisor for Ventura and Santa Barbara counties, and today he's going to be speaking on avocado cankers and their causes. So Ben, I'm going to pass this over to you and you can go ahead and share your slides.
Can you see it now?
Yeah, we see it.
Okay.
Yeah, looks good.
Okay. So today is Wednesday and it is hot as the dickens. And this is exactly the sort of situation that can lead to cankers. We typically see avocado diseases here. And avocados are prone to a lot of minor diseases. As you can see, this is actually a sunburn, but it creates a wound and eventually you get some kind of a fungus that starts growing in the wound. And then we have the major disease worldwide of avocado, which is Phytophthora cinnamomum, which is avocado root rot. And left untreated, the root rot will kill a tree. So here is the disease tetrahedron, and this is so important to understand. You have to have the host, which in this case is the avocado. You have to have the pathogen, and this is any number of things that can go after avocados: Verticillium, Botryosphaeria, Phytophthora cinnamomum, and stuff like that. You have to have the environment, and it's really interesting that this summer along the coast here, we've had a lot of fog. And we were out recently looking at a passion fruit grower in Carpinteria, and they've been asking about this staining on the fruit, and it turned out to be a septoria, which is fungal infection. And I have never seen it in my life. I've heard about it, but the predisposing environment that sets up the passion fruit in this case for disease was exactly what we needed. We normally don't get it. And then this more critical issue as well is the time element. So many diseases have a very rapid effect on a plant, and a lot of them are slow, kind of chronic, and it takes a long time for the disease to really fully express itself. And in the meantime, the grower doesn't realize what's going on. It's a kind of a slow thing, and I come along and I go, what the heck happened here? And the grower is going, well, yeah, it doesn't look very good, does it? So we also talk about the abiotic situation that creates disease, disorder, or damage. Okay, so this is not, this is an environmental effect that can predispose the plant then to other disease. And in the case of avocados, we have a tree that can bear a tremendous amount of fruit, which is a strain on the plant. And if there's a kind of a background level of disease, that strain on the plant sets it up for that disease to take over. We irrigate along the coast here. We irrigate avocados anywhere in the Mediterranean climates where we get winter rainfall and no rain during much of the growing season for avocado. We use waters that are typically of poor quality, which makes this management issue really important because it can put a stress on the plant from too much water and too little water. We have freezing conditions, we have hot wind conditions, we've got something that seems so simple like grafting, but that sets up the plant for stress. Pruning, again, is you chop out all that stored energy in the tree, and the energy to push new growth then puts stress on the tree. insect damage, perseamite when it first came in, defoliated trees, so the tree puts energy into refoliating, and then sunburn damage. So these are all outside stressors that can often be called avocado diseases, but they're more commonly disorders that set the tree up for disease eventually. So recently we've had fire damage, and you can see cankers that occur. This is the heat from the fire, causing the sap to burst right through the bark. So this opens up wounds then, which can then infect the tree. And oftentimes with these abiotic stresses, you'll see some kind of limitation. So here's the case of fire that occurred recently, and it burned along a little creek bed, and it only burned the trees right up against the burn area. And so a lot of times abiotic, stressors, you can see some kind of clear delimitation. Here's a situation where we had fire damage that burned the canopy, exposing the trunk. And it's not the fire that's causing damage here in this case, it's actually sunburn damage in this case. And then, sunburn can cause as much or more damage to trees as fire can. One of the problems that we have with Verticillium, which is a fungal infection, is that it causes the canopy to expose the trunk, and then it's not the Verticillium that kills the tree, it's the sunburn damage that eventually kills the tree. So it's, there's a real dance here between the biotic, the fungal or bacterial pathogen, and the abiotic that is stressing the tree. So it's hard to really say exactly what comes first. Now here's an example of a tree that had frost damage. So it defoliated, exposing the branch to sunburn, and the sunburn damaged and destroyed the cambium just below the bark. But you can see right here that, in chipping away, you can see the new growth that's occurring. So the damage was done, the pathogen, the symptoms were relieved, and slowly the tree is overgrowing that damage. And so you'll often see this occurring with abiotic symptoms. Here's a condition of tractor blight. Okay, this is a tree right along a picking road where somebody banged into the tree. You can see the damage that's occurred, ripped out the bark, and this white here is the sap, the tree trying to push out disease. So, when you see sap in any type of tree, that's a tree's response to, trying to heal itself, healing a wound. Here's a case of woodpeckers that were drilling on an avocado tree, and you can see the white sap here that responds to the wound. Okay, any wound response is going to generate this white sap. Here's woodpecker damage that's been done to the fruit itself as well. You can often see that white sap appearing on the fruit. And here's an example of extensive wounding that's occurred on a tree where kids have been clambering around on it. So effectively, anytime you get wounding occurring to an avocado tree, you'll see that a white sap being exuded to try and regenerate new growth. And this is actually it's a sign of a healthy tree. You want to see that sap coming out. A stressed tree will not produce that sap. So this is time for quiz number 1, eh?
Okay, and Peter just brought that up for you.
So what's the most common characteristic that links most wounds seen in avocados? White sap, black sap, orange sap, brown crud.
Okay, the results should be coming up for you.
Very good. I don't like brown crud, but yeah, white sap.
And your second question is coming. The
white sap is dangerous. It's insecticidal. It's sweet. It's a complex terpene. I didn't tell you what that white sap is, so this will be interesting to see what the responses are.
All right, and you should be seeing those results.
Oh, this goes to tell, it's a sweet, it's sugar, it's D-mannahepulose. It's a 7-carbon sugar. You can, put your finger on it and taste it. It really is truly sweet. And it's just, it's the sugar sap, and it's completely harmless. Actually, bacteria love to grow on it. And, they will ferment it and make an alcohol out of it. But it's a 7-carbon sugar. The Lauraceae, the family that avocado finds itself in, is the only family that produces the 7-carbon sugar. So it's unique in the plant world. So, so exciting. So we'll go on to the next part of it. So disease, and I want you to keep this in mind. What is disease? Dis-ease, it's a disorder. So we see diseases like armillaria, which are primary pathogens, and in many cases, just kill a plant outright. There's not really much you can do, and you might as well just yank the tree as soon as you first start seeing it. Other diseases are caused by, and this is my own classification. I'm not a plant pathologist, and so plant pathologists may be shrieking and tearing their hair out at this, but I categorize them as primary and secondary. And secondary pathogens I find are, if you, interseed soon enough, you can turn the tree around and the tree will live. And then I further categorize these into kind of a chronic pathogen and a catastrophic. Chronic kind of goes on for years and years and years, and the tree will live, and it may not be very productive, and it may thin the canopy, and you may not produce any fruit because it gets sunburned, but the tree will live. And just, you sort of wake up one day and you go, what's wrong with that tree? And then you have other diseases that are really catastrophic, like Verticillium, where boom, in a weekend, the tree goes down and you go, well, something really serious happened here. And a lot of times this will happen like a freeze, it'll happen like, gophers don't really go after avocados so much, but it's sort of like a gopher that goes after a lemon tree. Boom, the tree is down, and it's down for good a lot of times. So I have these different ways of categorizing disease, whether it's fast acting or slow acting, and whether the tree recovers or not. So these kind of chronic, slow-going ones, when the tree is thinning, the canopy is thinning, you get dieback, you get this what we call stag hoarding, these dead branches. Avocado root rot falls into this kind of chronic, slow-acting. It eventually kills the tree if you don't turn it around. Occasionally you'll see aerial cankers. I've only seen this a couple, 3 times. You'll see the cankers on the main branches and trunk, but more commonly it's kind of a general tree collapse. In general, trunk cankers, and we haven't really gotten to trunk cankers yet, but trunk cankers are not associated with rapid collapse. Here is an example of a rapid collapse that occurred with Verticillium wilt that I just witnessed last week. And it happened so fast, the fruit is still hanging on the tree. And you can tell by the color of the leaves, it's a pretty rapid collapse of the tree where the tree still has, it looks like the leaves have been burned. So cankers are the result of some kind of chronic long-term impact, usually. There's always exceptions to that, but usually cankers show up in trees that have a kind of long-term environmental impact on them. So the first canker tree that we're going to talk about in avocado is avocado blackstreak. And whoop, that's why it's called blackstreak, right? Because you get this secondary darkening of the trunk and branches, and then you get this white sap forming, which again is symptomatic of a wound. We find this occurring in the Guatemalan varieties. You don't normally see, I've I have never seen it in Zutano or Bacon. And those tend to be pretty tough trees relative to, the Guatemalans in our environment, like Hast, Reed, Mayball, tend to be a slightly weaker tree in general. This has only been reported in California. And the symptoms are this white canker, the white sugar exudate on the trunk and main branches. It can be pretty shocking to see this. They're very shallow lesions. I've never seen a tree die from this. It's usually the environmental condition, like too much salt or poor watering, that caused the tree to die. And you'll get other symptoms, because it's a prolonged kind of chronic decline. You'll see smaller leaves, you'll see dieback, you'll see zinc deficiency, bunchy growth. You'll see, sometimes in hot conditions like we have right now, you'll see new foliage collapsing. It seems to be brought on by salinity, drought, primarily irrigation practices. Now, so this is leading up to, is this an abiotic disorder, okay? Or is it a biotic? Is this a pathogen, or is this a human induced? Is that the biotic factor that's playing a major part in this disorder here? Oftentimes, once the stress has been identified, the tree can recover within a year. These white cankers will clear up once you fix the irrigation practices. So it's really a human-induced problem. Recently, this has been identified as being a Botraceferia. Now, this is this huge order of fungal pathogens. Excuse me, they're fungi, but they're typically decomposers. So you go into an environment like an avocado orchard, and there's just organic matter all over the place, decomposing, being decomposed by Botraceferia along with a bunch of other fungi. And so the fungal spores are everywhere. So with that, we'll go to question number 2. Black streak is a fatal disease, an indication of water stress, a new avocado disease, or an insect infestation.
All right, we're going to bring up those results.
Yeah, it's a water stress indication. So, here it's a dance between environment and a fungal pathogen. Is there another question?
No, that's all for this one.
Oh boy, okay. So another canker that we see in avocados is, we call it stem and leaf blight when it shows up on the new growth. Oftentimes you'll see, a dieback. And it was once referred to as salt and pepper syndrome. You see dead tissue and new tissue. And we used to call it Diathyrella canker because that was what the fungal pathogen was that you could always played out from it. Again, it indicates underwatering usually, or a water management issue. These symptoms, especially the leaf blight symptoms. Okay, it's a fungal leaf blight if it shows up on the leaves, or it's a stem blight if it shows up on the stems. And if you see it on the trunk, we call it a trunk canker. So it's wherever it shows up. Anyway, this rarely kills mature trees, but it will kill a young tree. Trees that are just 2 to 3 years old, brand new trees, this fungal pathogen will move right down the stem and kill the tree all the way to the root. And in that case, if you see it showing up on a young tree, you'd come in and you'd cut out back into good quality tissue, because this is a fungal pathogen, and it grows down through living tissue, killing it. It turns out that Botryosphaeria canker is actually caused by many species of Botryosphaeria, so we now call it a Botraceferia canker. Now, can you spell that rapidly? I normally call it a bot canker. You get the same kinds of symptoms. You get this white exudate, it's the sugar exudate, the D-mannihepulose sugar that is exuded as the sap. It can appear on the stems and leaves, but a lot of times it'll show up in the main trunk. Again, this is the Botraceferia are decomposers. And in an avocado orchard, there's all this organic matter, and they are decomposing that material. The Botraceferia, there's at least 15 different species and genus that will cause these cankers. Again, as soon as you figure out how to correct the irrigation practices, these symptoms will clear up within a year. Now, it turns out there are Botraceferia out there. So, for example, the ones that happen in pistachio, they can kill a tree. And Botraceferia in this case are like blackstreak. They will kill a young tree, brand new 1-year-old tree. But, you know, pretty much a 10-year-old tree is not going to succumb to this. A lot of times when you cut open trees, you'll see this staining. And this is usually an indication of Botraceferia canker that occurred many years ago. So here's the case where, you know, there was no sap on the branch, but at some point in the past, there had been an infection, and that infection had discolored the wood. Well, actually, it's the tree discoloring itself. This is a wound response on the part of the tree. And these tannins are released by the tree in order to close off the infection. It's the tree's response in order to prevent further infection in the tree. Okay. Again, this Botraceferia cankers are favored by water stress. The Guatemalan varieties, selection races tend to be more susceptible than the Mexican. Both blackstreak and the Botraceferia, you'll see at the ends of the irrigation lines, at the top of the hill, and during droughts. And so inferentially, you know, you can see that, you know, it's where the lowest pressure is, it's where the lowest water is that gets to the tree. So these are water stress diseases, and they can usually be corrected with putting on more water more frequently, or following the weather patterns. You know, all too often growers get on, I'm going to irrigate every other week, you know, on a Monday, without regard to the Santa Ana condition that blows, or the temperatures, or you know, it needs to be adjusted to the irrigation schedule, needs to be adjusted to the weather. Okay, another canker, and this was a fun one. You know, plant pathologists enjoy this sort of thing. This is bacterial canker caused by Xanthomonas campestris. Turns out they've got a bacterial canker in other parts of the world, but not caused by Xanthomonas campestris. So this is unique to California. And it forms these little pockets, and usually you can see them going straight up a trunk or a branch, goes in line, and there's a little flap that forms here. Okay, here's an old canker that dried up, and there's a little flap right there. Here's an old canker that dried up, and here's a flap. And if you were to, and you see this sugar exudate leaking out, it's leaking out. So it forms this pocket there that fills up with the sap, the liquid form. And if you take your penknife and you kind of jab away at this, this little oozing sore, it'll suddenly leach out, it'll spray out. It's a very dramatic infection. Again, it's a related to irrigation or salt management. It's in a Mediterranean climate where water is so important, and typically the waters are of a saline nature. It's hard to distinguish between too much water or too little water or salt accumulation and poor salt management. So I mean, these really may be more related to salt accumulation in the root zone rather than just literally drought. So I lump these as the big bad bees: black streak, Botraceferia canker, bot canker, and bacterial canker. These organisms, these disease-causing organisms, are present everywhere. They're in the air. We breathe these, especially when you walk into an avocado orchard that's rich with spores. And then you set up the stress by water management, too little water, poor water timing. One of the hardest things is you've got big trees and little trees right next to each other, and they're all getting irrigated the same, and you're either overwatering one or underwatering the other, and eventually drought conditions hit, and you'll see these symptoms popping up on either the older trees or the younger trees. So this really brings home the question: are these diseases abiotic, okay, irrigation related, or are they biotic because they're caused by a human being that is not managing them correctly? Or you can always find a disease-causing organism associated with them, but these move into the tree once the stress is created. So that, if you remember this disease tetrahedron, where it's the time and it's the environment that really sets the tree up for disease. And so if you can intercede soon enough, you won't see these symptoms, or if you correct the environment, you won't see the symptoms. But in the case of the big bad bees, if you've got an avocado orchard, you've got the host there, and you're always going to have the inoculum present. So let's go to quiz question number 3. The 3 Ds, the symptoms occur rapidly, are chronic, are always lethal, and require insecticides. Occur rapidly, are they do they show up one day, or does it take a while for them to show up? Should we ask the second questions?
Yeah, because the results will be shown at the same time.
Okay. The 3 Ds are made bad by poor nutrient management, poor insect management, poor water management, or poor pruning technique. So you got 2 to go.
And I do have a question I'll ask you while people are answering that one. This one's from Judy, and she asks, can Botraceferia show up just because the weather is foggy?
Okay, Botraceferia, again, is a water stress related. And you almost always see it, I'll get your answer. You almost always see it when drought conditions exceed 2 years. It pops up all over the place. Typically, you'll only see it in a poorly managed orchard. Again, at the end of an irrigation line at the top of the hill in a windy spot where you're using the same faucet to manage a whole lot of different environments. When we have fog, like we had this summer along the coast, you tend not to see it because you don't see the water stress. And I want to emphasize that it's the stress that occurs from, I irrigate every day, but I only put a gallon on. So, on a big tree, that's not very much. You know, so it becomes a question of the amount that you put on and the frequency. So timing it to the needs of the tree. So usually when you have fog conditions, you don't have those stress environment occurring, and so you see less of it. Okay, yes, the 3 Bs, they are chronic. It takes a while for them to show up. You rarely, and I want to stress that you rarely see them show up, you know, within a week or 10 days or 2 weeks or a month. It kind of shows up in 3 or 4 months, and suddenly you go out there and you go, my goodness, something happened here. These are not related to insecticides at all. This is, what do I buy to cure this? Well, you're not going to cure it with an insecticide. The 3 Bs are made bad by poor water management. Yes, yes, yes. That's, you know, 80% of the problems I see out there, not just for avocados, but citrus, for dragon fruit, for lychees, for passion fruit, are water related. Okay, next. Okay, so those are the 3 Bs. Those are pure management related. It's the it's the biotic factor of the human being that is not getting it right. Now this guy, Phytophthora mengii, is used to be called Phytophthora citricula. It's a Phytophthora. It's related to root rot. It is not the same species as Phytophthora cinnamomum. They are phytophtheras, but they affect trees differently, and they affect different trees. When you see it on the trunk, we call it trunk canker, and you usually don't see it beyond about 18 inches from the ground. If you do, the tree is dead, dead, dead. Usually it's along the coast. This is the second most important disease, and you see it down in San Diego to a certain extent, but really when you are right here along the coast, the other day I saw it in Santa Monica, but it starts here in Ventura and moves through Santa Barbara, and the hot spot for it is San Luis Obispo, that foggy place, cold and wet, where you see it. It's a fungus that goes to a lot of other plants, sheepers, creepers. It's a fungus that goes to a lot of other plants, genus like walnut, cherry. It'll go to cherimoya, fir trees. I've got a very sensitive keyboard here. Occurs at the base. And with the Botraceferia cankers, with black streak, you'll see it up in the canopy, higher up. The citricula, trunk canker, collar rot, these are all found at the base of the tree. We call these a crown rot, where the crown roots are, because if you pull away the leaves here and start looking at the crown roots, you'll see the cankers appearing there as well. Okay, trunk canker. Again, trunk canker, collar rot, we call it citricula. That was the old name before it was renamed to mengii, named after John Mengi, plant pathologist at UC Riverside. You see the white sugar exudate, okay, symptomatic of a wound. You'll see kind of this orange tan infection. It's a Phytophthora infecting. You'll see good clean tissue right next to it. The fungus grows around the base of the tree. It grows around the base of the tree. Okay, and slowly girdles. It's a chronic infection. Phytophthora root rot on a 3-year-old tree might kill it in a year. On an older tree, the tree may live for 10 years. Citricula is a slow acting. I've seen 25-year-old trees that have these cankers. And then as you know, you get a drought and boom, the tree goes down. But you know, the cankers have been there for a long time, so it's a chronic infection. The tree death can be very slow. And because it's a Phytophthora, you know, the phosphorus acid, phosphonate materials are very effective. Okay. So the collar rots, crown rots, the tree has a nice canopy on them. Often the leaves will turn a little bit yellow, but the leaf size stays the same. The tree is still vigorous, so you can find leaf litter. This is as opposed to root rot, Phytophthora cinnamomum, where the tree really does lose vigor. It kills all the fine roots, doesn't lose its ability to make leaves, and you lose leaf litter. You dig around with citricula and you'll find some nice roots down there. So it's not root rot. Even though they're both Phytophtheras, they act differently. The symptoms are different. And then when you dig around near the soil line, you'll find the cankers. You can occasionally see cankers on trunks and in the branches to get aerial root rot, but it is extremely rare in this environment. You know, maybe if you go to a more rainfall where there's more rain splash, you'll find Phytophthora cinnamomum in the canopy. It's rare here. To distinguish this from the big bad bees, okay, remember the big bad bees are stress related, and maybe if you want to say all diseases stress related, but the bees are related to pure water stress, and you'll see the cankers throughout the canopy. The crown rot, okay, is found around the base of the tree, you know, within about 18 inches. It's found on the wet side of the tree. This can be the side where the sprinklers are hitting, or it's on the north side in this environment, where it's the side of the tree that stays wet the longest. Phytophtheras are mobile in free water. They move around. So they want free water to do their thing. So you'll see where water accumulates, where the sprinkler hits, and these crown rots, trunk rots like this are common. It's not always caused by Phytophthora mengii, but you know, a lot of trees are affected by a wet trunk. And so it's not just avocados, it's citrus, it's eucalyptus, it's sycamores. You don't want to wet the tree trunk. With the citricula, you'll see it. I call it citricula crown rot, and Phytophthora mengii is found on the north side where it stays moist. Or really commonly, you know, growers, when they go in and they prune, they'll pile up the prunings right next to the base of the trees. That keeps it moist. You don't want to pile up wood, or, you know, people will have their supports for the branches when there's a lot of fruit. When they don't have any fruit, they'll pile them up against the base of the tree. Don't do that. So you want to keep good air circulation, and that's how you prevent Phytophthora mengii. Collar rot is a fungus. It's a brown algae. It's not a true fungus. It's a Phytophthora. It's a plant eater, and it responds to phosphonates, which Fosgard, Formula 1, that sort of stuff, just like root rot does. In the case of this crown rot, this collar rot, it's best to get the active material on the canker itself, and it responds to fairly frequent treatments, application treatments, you know, once a month or once every 6 weeks until the canker is healed. This fungus actually will go to fruit as well. So if you've got a low-hanging canopy, the rain splash or irrigation splash will move the fungal spores or the brown algae spores from the ground to the fruit, and it'll kind of hopscotch up into the canopy. So there are other fungicides. Again, it's a brown algae, but they're labeled as fungicides. Metalaxyl, Ridamil gold. These are true fungicides, algicides. And there's been certainly resistance that's formed to the metalaxyls, and to a certain extent the Ridamil gold as well. Arondis is about to be released. this is a true fungicide as well. And it should be released, it's supposed to be released this year, but it hasn't been, so probably next year. In the past, people have painted copper on the cankers to control this crown rot, and it's putting a Band-Aid on it. Phytophthora are a systemic infection, and you need to get a material like the phosphonates into the tree to correct the infection. So it just, you know, painting it might make you feel good, but it's not really going to do anything to control the infection. So with that, let's go to quiz number 4. Cholera or crown rot is a disease that one can be corrected by improved irrigation, can be corrected with a pesticide, can be improved with improved air circulation, or all of the above. And I think there's another question here as well.
Yeah, there'll be one more after this one.
Okay.
So we'll leave this one up for just a second or two longer and then bring up the results.
All of the above. Yes, 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 yes. So it's you know, with these true diseases, you've got to approach it all the way. I mean, and it's, you know, it is an infection, and it's the stressor here in this case is getting the tree wet, the crown rot wet. It can be corrected with the pesticide, but it's, you know, it's creating this good air circulation, and so you have to do all of things. So I was in an orchard in San Luis the other day. It was totally, I mean, you know how these avocado jungles are. I mean, the air was dead inside, and it was wet everywhere, and it was covered with crown rot at the bases of the trees, and it's, you know, it just never dries out. So pruning would help, and then moving the prunings away from the base of the tree. Okay, cholera rot or crown rot can be cured by pesticide treatments with irrigation management, pesticide treatments with irrigation management. Something's missing. And pesticide treatments with irrigation management and good horticultural practices. Yeah, so it's really you've got to approach it with a, you know, whole systems approach. It's not just pesticides and irrigation management. It's, you know, making sure the trees are pruned correctly so you get good irrigation, air circulation. Okay, we're going on into the home stretch here. So the 4 cankers that we've just been talking about, there's another one that a lot of people have heard about, this Fusarium Dieback. It's a pest disease complex, and you'll see the same kind of white sugar exudate, these cankers, and they become galleries that for the burrowing of these beetles, these ambrosia beetles, and that is a problem that we can deal with through pruning practice for the most part in avocados. It goes after sycamores and kills them outright, goes after willows and kills them outright. It's a management issue, and a Keef Escalon is going to cover this shot hole borer Fusarium Dieback in a future presentation, I think in January or February, I think. Next. Fusarium Dieback starts with an infection. The beetle moves in, it carries the fusarium that it's feeding on, and the fusarium survives by decomposing wood inside the tree. The beetle makes these galleries in which it lays its eggs and feeds off the fungal farms, and gradually the tree will die. Typically in avocado, it attacks the outer branches. So one of the techniques of dealing with this is through a pruning regime, which Keith will speak to more about in the future. So gradually the tree dies, and Um, that's not good. Next slide, please. And we found this all the way from San Diego up into San Luis Obispo. So it's throughout the avocado major growing areas. Next. But I really want to emphasize most of the cankers that we see, the wounds that we see are not primary catastrophic diseases. Okay? In avocado in general, the situation, if you correct the irrigation, and this can be too much water, too little water, and the timing, you can correct the environment in which these pathogens thrive, and the tree will heal itself. In the case of Phytophthora, Mengii, crown rot, collar rot, citricula, you may need some help of a fungicide like phosphonate, but you know, anytime you can improve irrigation and air drainage, make sure that the trunks aren't getting hit by water. You know, the tree can have, if it has enough energy, it can overcome that disease as well. Next. And then this is something in Florida, and Monique Rivera covered this a couple of months ago in a webinar. Laurel wilt disease is in the southeast. It's moving west. It's in Texas. It moves with wood. This is very similar to Fusarium Dieback that's occurring here right now. It's primarily moved by wood, and the biotic factor in this case is the human being that's moving that wood around. But this is a very rapid lethal disease. It's a primary pathogen. Once you got it, it's hard to save that tree. Next. And you can get these cankers that show up that really sawdust tubes, not truly a canker, but you're alerted to the condition of the tree through these this exudate, the sawdust exudate that's occurring on the trunk of the tree. Next. It's spread by an ambrosia beetle, and it does the same thing. It's spreading a fungus that it feeds on. And you know, it happens pretty rapidly. You've really got to be on your toes to intercede, and usually it's tree removal to prevent the spread. Next. And this, as of January in 2019, it's throughout the southeast, and it's moved into Texas, and it's been moved by people. Next. So you can read this, hear more about this by reviewing the webinar that Monique Rivera did in March. So, and you can review a lot of the webinars at the website here. So with that, our last quiz is, most cankers described here are abiotic, are lethal, are chronic, are infectious, or A and C. Most of the cankers described here are abiotic, lethal, chronic, infectious, or A and C. A and C, hooray, yes. Most of these are correctable. They're not lethal. I mean, they will kill a young tree. There's no doubt about that. But you know, a lot of it's intercession and correcting the practices that we have that are causing the situation that leads to the infection. They are chronic, and you know, yeah, they're infectious. You know, and you might say A, C, and D, but I mean, the material is all over the place. It's not like a true infection, but I mean, I'm not a plant pathologist, and if you want to argue that, you can get a point for it. Anyway, so any questions at this point?
We do have several questions. All right, so this first one that I have, The white sugar showing up visually to show that there's a problem. How do you diagnose the exact canker disease visually, or can you?
Yeah, each one of these is slightly different. So bacterial canker has these silver dollar size cankers that go in a line up and down the trunk or on the branch with the Botraceferia canker. It's little spots that show up all over, and the Botraceferia cankers tend to be more of a irregular patch that will show up. So it's like a shotgun for black streak, and you'll see and then you'll see the black streaking. I mean, that's why it gets its name. And with the Botraceferia cankers, you'll see it as a kind of irregular patches that will appear. And then the bacterial cankers are very discrete. They're almost all the same size of a silver dollar, and as they dry up, you get this little flap, this woody flap over it. And then with the citricula, the collar rot, it's always at the base of the tree, base of the trunk, within about 18 inches of the ground. So I'm just noting the type of canker that you see, the shape of it, you can distinguish amongst them.
Okay, this next one, regarding salt management, are there strategies of filtration through organic material, or is the solution more of a filtration issue?
Okay, filtration meaning infiltration. So you're looking at applying more water than the tree needs. And you can get a sense of what your water quality is by doing a water analysis. And you don't have to do that very frequently. You might do it once every 2 or 3 or 4 years. Is it high salinity? Is it low salinity? Is it high chloride? Is it low salinity? You get these weird water reports. I just looked at one that had 190 part per million chlorides, but it only had 190 part per million salinity. I mean, it's like almost pure water, but it was just all chloride, just about. Anyway, so when you're along the coast using well waters, you're looking at 2 decisiemens per meter. You're looking at 2,000 part per million salinity. So there you've got to start working on. Okay, I'm going to do every month I'm going to do an excess irrigation in order to leach salts. And you might be able to go out and get a salinity tester for $100. And then just look at, okay, if I put on, 10% more, if I put it on twice as frequently, what happens to that salinity? And you can get a sense of, oh, I need to do it this often in order to bring the salinity down close to what the water salinity is. So, there's just different strategies for doing it. And in years that we don't get, we really are dependent on rainfall for clearing up our salts. And if we get late rains into June like we did this year, there's much less of a need to be so anxious about it. But when we have 5 years of drought, you got to be right on top of it to avoid these cankers.
Okay, and then we have 2 questions pretty much the same. So should home gardeners remove the leaves from underneath their trees to help prevent fungal diseases? And the other one is basically, does removing leaf litter help to reduce the occurrence of infections?
Leaf litter is the manna in the wilderness for avocados. They desperately want mulch. In fact, trees want mulch. Trees grew up with mulch, and it's tidy gardeners that are the worst scourge of trees, cleaning up leaves. The leaves are decomposing. They create a highly diverse antagonistic environment to phytophthoras and pathogenic fungi. And as long as there's good aeration, you don't want to have there's some crazy people out there put on 3 feet of mulch and they go, I'm doing the right thing. No, you're creating a weird environment. That's not natural, and it excludes oxygen. So you want to have an oxygenated environment. Typical mulch is going to be, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 inches thick, and it's going to be aerated, and it's going to be, filled with insects that are, churning that stuff and converting it to nutrients. And so mulch is supposed to stay where it's created. Don't take it away.
Okay, and the next one is, can you share information on avocado's water needs, volume per size of tree, and frequency of application?
No, it's so difficult. You cannot cookbook irrigation. You put your thumb in the ground. Is it wet? Is it dry? This is a perfect example. Right now it's 98 degrees outside. 2 days ago it was 68 degrees. We're predicting red flag warnings coming on this afternoon. It's going to be howling wind here. When do you irrigate? You might irrigate while it's blowing. Ideally, what you want to do is anticipate it a couple of days, because once the wind starts blowing, the tree shuts down, and it shuts down to its detriment. A tree needs to transpire when it's hot, and it closes its stomata because it cannot sustain transpiration, and the trees heat up, and you get windburn damage. So, having said that, you cannot, along the coast especially, you can't put a tree on a regular schedule. So, full-grown, 18-foot tree by 18-foot tree in a week's time can use 150 gallons of water that week. Okay, that's not unusual around here. Or it can use 25 gallons, or it can use 300 gallons, So you're asking me to tell you exactly what to do tomorrow? No, I can't do that. You have to go out and actually put your thumb in the ground and see, is it dry, is it wet? If you can take soil and squeeze it in your hand and it retains the shape of your hand, there's adequate moisture. That's as much as I can tell you. People put these onto regular schedules, and that's exactly why they get the cankers. They're put on a schedule.
Okay, just a couple more questions for you. Is Phytophthora managed through antagonistic fungus in a healthy soil, or
Yes.
exclusively from phos acid and others listed?
Oh, no. The Phytophthora get out of hand because they're mismanaged. And, in normal soil, they are controlled through antagonistic fungi, through the mulch that's there that is supporting fungi and bacteria as well, that are just go to town. They consume phytophthoras. So resorting to a chemical control is what you do when things have gotten out of whack, and they help you return the tree to a kind of balance. And mulch is number one is irrigation, but the real first line of defense against Phytophthora is a good layer of mulch.
Okay, and the final question that we have, does laurel wilt attack citrus too?
Laurel wilt does not attack citrus. It goes after the Lauraceae. And the only other laurel that we have in California besides avocado, this invasive plant that's been moved here from Mexico and Central America, is California bay laurel, which is found along the coast. So when laurel wilt disease comes in, it's going to go after bay laurel, and it's going to go after avocado.
Okay, it looks like that's all of the questions we have. So thank you, Ben, for presenting today. And thank you, everybody, for attending. I think we're going to get ready to close this webinar out. And we hope you all come back for our next one in November.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ben.
Bye-bye.